Right. Hmm. Yeah, I like how this tribe starts, always in the chat. Everyone is greeting. Welcome back, everyone. Um, uh, Salutations in the chat, and maybe for if someone else is still joining. All right, so let's start. As usual, before I start, please confirm the screen sharing. You can see my PowerPoint presentation. I see heads are nodding, and obviously you're hearing me since you're, yeah. Uh, and the chat is still running. Let me open the chat also on the side. Right. All good. Okay, great. So let's start. Mhm. Okay, so welcome back, right? So this is week four, actually the last week, sprint two. So that's the second week in sprint two, and our course is going to be over after that. So I'm going to share what should be completed today. As usual, the agenda looks the same like before. I'm going to share the plan for this week, go through some open questions. Actually, the live workshop today is going to be interesting. I'm going to share some, like a little bit more advanced topics, you assignments for them, but I think they are useful for you in general. And of course, we'll go through also what's expected for next week. I'll walk through the assignment also that you have for this week. I saw already in the discussion board people, I don't remember whom exactly, but someone was already starting in the assignments of the current week. And usually I see people are comfortable with last week, where, yeah, you already did quite a lot with Postman, etc. So I it's gonna be an easy week, hopefully for you. But I'm gonna do the walkthrough anyway. Um, so of course, the sprint started last week. It's gonna finish this Friday. And of course, last week assignment, I expect that you finished the time tracking API. I understand it could be a simple assignment, but it's actually giving you a little bit of space to breathe before the last week, and of course, dealing with the UI, etc. So just making sure the next assignment. So I didn't receive any questions about the assignment, which is typical actually for week three. Um, so please raise your voice now if you had any difficulty, because yeah, there's nothing even documented on the discussion board to go back to, etc. So um, this is where you are now. So I expect you to be comfortable with the time tracking API. And of course, this week you're going to finish the comments API. Of course, the usual reviewing, finishing up the assignment. Wrap day routine is going to start on Saturday. And yeah, by now you're comfortable, of course, with the peer reviewing. Uh, Actually, I really like the exercise. I really like your remarks. Maybe it's a side note. I really like how you are responding to each other on the Confluence page. So really, kudos for that. I would say try not to be super nice. Sometimes I see the remarks are like very, very nice. But yeah, if that's a review. That's a good practice for you, actually, for normal work. Being blunt and clear and precise on the information for the other party. So don't worry. Of course, you can put nice words, but don't worry about providing critical remarks. This, especially for the last assignment, it's not a small one. Provide as many remarks as you can, no problem. I think it's for the benefit of everyone to learn from each other's even. And I would even advise, it's nice to read the remarks coming from even from other reviewers, other students. Just go through the Confluence remarks. It's I find it useful just to scroll through it and just see what's happening. Um, I hope today there will be no problem with Mentimeter. I tested it week 2 when we had the exam or the Menti quiz. I don't know what was going wrong. But maybe I'll switch to Menti. What is it? Hang on. I'll leave you with the presentation so you can log into the quiz. I'll open it in the other window. Mm-hmm. Here. Come on. Yep. You know what? As usual, I'll also log in using my phone. Where is it? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's start. In the header of a REST API, there's one of the headers called content type. What is it responsible for? Does it specify the HTTP method to be used, the format of the request payload, authentication? Let's see. All right. It's really important, the content type. And maybe we can show it in Postman. I believe most people know it, even with the wrong answers, but I think here, when you see there's the headers section, uh, and then let's see when in a moment. Uh, like I don't know why the drop comment. Yeah, like this. This one, content type. And then there are different types you can provide. Maybe it's good to read about the content type because it makes a difference, especially when you're making requests not via UI, but actually if you make it using the like a Linux command, for example, let's see what I wanted to show. Just give me a moment, please. Yeah, like this. So I'm showing you the format of the request, but as a curl format. So if you're working on Linux, it's all commands, right? So you don't have a user interface. So when you make a request, you will have to provide the header. Actually, this is a code, right? So the content type, it typically should be provided. So it's one of the things that, yeah, it's good to know the information, what the content type, what are the content types. Just Google it, read about it. Here, it's not a real exam. It's just for you to realize what exists. And I know content type is one of the things that are heavily used. Uh, and sometimes people forget to provide it in the header. Then the API fails, for example. So content type is one of the most things that you would use in your life with headers in API in general. Um, let's go to the next question. I hope that's an easy one. So what's the difference between a put and a patch method? Okay, now that's interesting. Um, so I understand we haven't worked with the patch methods in this course, but it's something to know. I've seen developers, right? So remember the CRUD operations we discussed at the beginning? There's the create, right? Read, update, and delete operations. And it's really important to stick with the CRUD operations. So a create is a post request, right? So if you want to insert a new record in the database through the API, then it's a post request. If you want to update a record in the database, then it's a put request. And then there's a patch request, which is typically for um, just updating like a single value, right? So let's say you have a database record, it has like 20 columns, and you just want to update like a single value in a single column. Then typically the best way to do it is a patch request. I have seen developers that make post requests to do everything. So it's like a post request, but then there's a parameter delete. So they use post to delete records, or they use post to update records, etc. And this is, we call it anti-pattern. So as a tester, you should know the differences. So if it's not like a very big update to the database, that you will get used to it when you see an API, and you will question, like, why do I need a put request? It should be a patch request. And the patch is clear from the name. And maybe you can read more about the patch, the difference with the put, or sample requests online, just see the differences, etc. But it's good to know that there is something called patch, which is different than a put, even though it makes a very similar functionality. Um, let's see. This is what I'm going to show you today, um, working with data files. And I don't expect you to know the answer, by the way, so it's fine. All right. Uh, as usual, Postman is, even though they make it a very simple uh, to use, it's also very confusing. So when we work with a CSV file input or data file input to Postman, which I will show you in a bit, it's very easy to work with different ways to read the data through the script, right? So surprise, Postman has three different syntax that you can put in your test script or the pre-request script, and they will all work with the CSV input. And I will show you live, like this example. Uh, yeah, it's just information, but I'm just putting it as a topic that I will show you the data input, and it's very good to know that there is that concept of reading from external data. You don't have to use the variables only inside Postman, but and especially for automation, it's much better to work with data files. So I just wanted you to know the information and to understand also that there are different syntax for reading data. The next one, I think this is the last question. Yeah, Postman is a user interface, but there's a command line tool which is capable of working with the Postman collections. If you have read about it before, you should know this answer. New line, post line, Newman, postcon. All right. Um, yeah, so that's good. Newman, I think you will get a reference in the next in the what is it called, the next course, the career module. Um, and we have some nice references there to if you want to continue, whether with the UI test automation or API test automation. And there will be some very nice articles also for working with Newman. Newman is very useful if you want to integrate your tests with the CI/CD pipelines, so build pipelines to automate nightly executions on delivery branches of the source code, etc. Newman is very useful with these. And of course, if you want to execute your Postman collection, like on a Linux environment, Newman is going to be your only way to do it. So it's very useful to follow up this course by learning about Newman. It's not complicated, but it can take like a few days until you really get the hang of it. So that's just information. Sorry, this is the last question. Yeah, creating environment variables. So you've worked with global variable, you've worked with the collection variable. I'll recap about them today, and I'll show you environment variables. We haven't discussed it before. It's not in the assignments. And I think this should be easy for you. All right. It's just very similar to everything else you've worked with. So this is about creating a variable, right? Using the test script. It's not about reading the variable. So of course, we struggled last time together, right? Remember about how to read the variables. So the double curly braces, this is not the way to use it within the test script. If you look at the question, the last two words there, this is about the test script itself. And the double curly braces, they do not work with the test script. Uh, sorry, Liliana, like, don't worry. I see in the chat Liliana is complaining, but don't worry. The more important part here is to learn. I'm putting these questions, even though I know you might not know the answers, but it's really to trigger your minds about more functionalities that can read them. Uh, and basically, everything in test script, if you're dealing with Postman, you'll see it always starts with this Postman point something or PM dot something. That's like the most common way in Postman to just work with the Postman library, basically. Um, you know, I know I said it doesn't matter the score, but just so you have something to tease each other for. But I don't think it makes a difference. Um, so congratulations, Kadri. Let's see. Let's go back to the session. What else do we have? Yeah, so from the last week, right? The time tracking, working with the developer tool, figuring out the API, how it works without getting documentation. Do you have any questions about this? So I'll keep the chat here. All right. So I'm not receiving any questions in the chat, and that's pretty normal for this week. So let's go to the workshop. Uh, I don't know how to hide this thing. Just maybe you don't see it, but it's bothering me. Unfortunately. Okay, let's go to the course time. Sprint 2, week 2. So it's only one assignment. As I mentioned, it's pretty large, so one assignment is enough. And it's there's only one task that's just different from what you've done before. So you'll need to construct a new collection for the commands API. In the command, so we in the API documentation, actually we have documentation for the post comments. So also making it a little bit easy. So it's not 100% working with developer tab. So you can also get to know what are the mandatory fields, etc. But of course, you will need to use the developer network tab for the put and the delete requests. So you need to create a new collection. So this time you create a collection on your own, right? Previously it was an existing collection. Should be easy. Maybe when you create a new collection, then you'll start adding the variables. You will need the authentication, etc. So of course, I know people are copying from other collections, but watch out when you're copying that you might mess up the collection. So I really recommend, as usual, try to like export your collection, do not delete it. So you would still have it, but just export it and try to import it again and try to execute your tests on the newly imported collection and see if it works. Maybe clear out the variables before you execute it, delete all your variables, and I'll show you maybe so it's not just words. So what I would do, maybe I would rename my existing collection to something else, like this, old or something. Right. So when you finish all your work, save your collection, but rename it to or export it first, then rename it, then import it again. But after you import, what I would do is to edit the global variables and just delete all of them. Just delete them and save. This is a good test for yourself, also for the reviewers who will execute your collection. So it's we're testers. We have to be critical also on ourselves. And when you're running the collection, also when you're reviewing, I hope you are running the entire collection, not one by one, uh, uh, much faster. And when you spot something that fails, then just try to run it individually, etc. So this is a test for yourself when you're delivering, basically. So that's what I meant, right? So you're gonna build the whole thing from scratch. So it's possible that you make mistakes. Um, and then, yeah, I'll ignore. Yeah, this is really important. Like, do not waste your time by logging bugs, right? So if you find, like we mentioned before, the error 500 when it's supposed to do 400, things like that, like just put a prefix, like in the test name itself, just uh, put a bug as a prefix in the text also, only in the title. So at least we know why the test case is failing because it's expecting error code 400 while it receives 500, but the name of the task itself is called bug. So, okay, when someone is reviewing, etc., it should be clear. Um, but yeah, the task itself, it starts here, right? So you need to add a new comment, right? To do that, you will need to create an issue first because the comments are children of an issue. You will add a new comment and then add another comment. So basically, you need to add two comments. And then your verification in the test script, it's actually to verify that both comments exist. And you will realize, okay, this means that you need to work with arrays. So if you have worked with arrays before in any other assignments or in your life, right? So you should know the concept of arrays. Then you will need to read from the JSON data the array of comments and verify that both comments exist, which you just added. Uh, Everything else is about validations and like trying with like irregular inputs, etc. Like you should be used to that already, but try to cover as much as you can. So take your time, think about like the negative scenarios and add them in your tests. And then there's the update comments. In this assignment, previously we had a separate section to just do delete comments, but we found like it's just kind of a waste of time. Nobody makes mistakes with the delete. But in here, we just made like just a task, right? So first update the comment, then delete the comment, and like try to uh, validate that the comment that's deleted is actually deleted. So basically, it's like delete and then try to update it again. So it's like update, delete, update. And the second update should actually give you a 404 not found, right? So it should fail actually to update. So the test case would succeed if the API fails, if this makes sense. So then like the delete is just like a step in between. It makes it simpler. Um, what else? Yeah, and then exporting the collection, cleaning up the variables, like I mentioned, import it again, and then execute the collection and see if it just works. This is just the assignment. And of course, you're used to the Confluence, so you upload it, submit, and do the peer review and finish up your evaluation for it. Any questions about the assignment before I move forward? Yeah. 5 more seconds. Any questions? Okay. Maybe just give me a second. All right. So now let's continue the live workshop. Um, Now it's not going to be related to assignment. This is just information for you. You can continue learning on your own for this one, but it's really interesting to know. So I created a collection that's called Read from CSV. So basically, what we need to do is very simple. So the first piece of information I wanted to share with you today is that there is a very nice dummy API. It's just called postmanecho.com, right? And um, it's just like a test API. You can feed it with information. It will give you a response with the same information. So, for example, if I make something like this, let's see, just for fun, call it passport, not password, right? So this API, it's just like echo, exactly what the API name says, right? It's just echoing information in a JSON data. So what I provided as like a URL parameter is returned back to me as a JSON response, right? It's a dummy API, but I just want to show you what happens if we work with this API using just data files, right? So basically, what I will do is that I will return like these username password information, but it will come back from a data file, right? So we have the variables. Remember, in the question in the quiz, it is possible to use information from the data file just directly like this, right? So in this case, because we're in the URL, so we use the curly braces. This means, yeah, okay, right now it's not a variable. It's like unresolved, doesn't exist, which is fine because we will still create it using the data file. Um, so don't worry about this. Okay. And then what I will do when I read the username and password variables from the data file, I will just print the information using the console.log. And basically, yeah, the file will have three different variables: the username, password, and some URL, I don't know, random stuff. And you see here, I'm using all the syntax that I showed you in the quiz of Mentimeter, right? So there's data.username. The next one, I will use variable.get, which is a very different format. And the third one will be the data square bracket URL. All three syntax works, right? So I can unify them. I can use it however I want. Of course, when you're working, typically it's better in any script to unify the structure of the script. So if, for example, I use like pm.variable.get, then I should use it everywhere, but I'm doing it different just for demonstration purposes. So I will read these information from a CSV file. And maybe I want to show you how the CSV file looks like. So basically it's here. CSV, it's comma separated file, just for people who are not familiar with the CSV. Excel actually can read CSV files, so it can look like a table. But basically it looks like this. A typical CSV file, it has a header row, which basically has the variable name, right? So we have a variable called URL, another one called user ID, but I will ignore it, a third variable called username, and a fourth one called password. And then every other row is having exactly four different values and all separated by comma, right? Um, and actually, if I open it in Excel, it just looks like a database table. So it is a very common practice that people work with CSV files as if it's a database. And it's a very common format also for Linux when it returns. If you want to read information, then it's comma separated. Then you can export it to any tool like Excel or a database, you can put it in a database, etc. So CSVs are very common in the automation world. That's why I really wanted to like just push this in. So if you've not worked with the CSV before, this is very interesting. And of course, there are tests, but for now, I'm ignoring the test because you can test whatever you want, right? So it's just JSON validation, etc. I don't care about the test itself. And then it's to read the CSV file. There's only one way to do that. It's about running the collection. Why? Because the CSV file is only useful if you have multiple records, multiple rows, right? So if I do like this, there's data, then you see it automatically detected I have three different rows, right? One is a header. So in total there are four, but one of them is a header. And actually right now, what happened is that Postman already translated the variables into actual variables, right? So when I run like this, then you have the console. If I show you, right? So we had the console.write, and then it made multiple. So we have three different API calls that were made. One is made for every row. So the first row, it has the username Abhinav, password is ABC, and the URL is Twitter something. And then the second iteration in the execution, it has another username, and there's another password and another URL, etc. So again, when you run the collection, by the way, you can execute the collection like 100 times. The people use this for performance testing, for example, but I don't care about this. So we select the file, we get the file, and let's say, for example, before I do that, let's say I try to like have a wrong variable name, something like this, right? So it will tell me like this variable does not exist, basically, if I try to run the collection. And I want to show you how it looks in the console, basically. Data articles, the one here. And then again, the console tab. I see username, whatever, this is the text, right? So this wrong variable, it's undefined, right? So that's just a demonstration that it's actually reading the variable from the CSV. I hope this is useful information. Look back at the video, read articles on your own, but this is going to be very useful for you if you work with APIs. Another very useful piece of information is the environment variables. So you've worked with global variables, right? So when we're creating a variable, right? For example, here, username, yeah, it says it's undefined. So let's add it as a variable. It could be a global variable, or it could be a collection variable, right? But there's also an environment variable. But right now, what is an environment, right? So typically, if you remember, there was the base URL, for example, here. A base URL, what does it point to? It's like a server or some application on the cloud, Jira API, something, something. But typically, when you're working in a test environment, you would like the IP of the server, something like this. I don't know, right? So typically we have in any project, we have three different environments, right? So there's a development environment, there's a test environment, and there's a pre-production or even a production environment. And sometimes you just want to like have the same variable defined for different environments, basically. So I would have here like environment dev environment, and we can Jira clone dev environment, right? And then it would have like a base URL, and then it will have a value. I don't know, something. and I don't know, username, I don't know, some user, something like this, right? And I can save this environment. Uh, but then uh, back to the environments. Uh, I don't know, Jira clone test environment, right? So a different server. Again, it will have like a base URL. It will have a value, I don't know, yeah, something different, like some HTTP, etc. And then it will have like a username variable, and the value will be like this, something. Um, so now we created, man, I will close all the tabs. The item, right? Remember, we had different environments, and you can see it right here. So if I choose the Jira clone dev environment, you will see a different set, right? So your usernames could be different, your project ID could be different, everything could be different, but you can just store the different environments like this. So you see here, when I click on the icon, it's already showing me that because I chose here Jira clone test environment. So when I'm looking at my variable values, it will show me the values for Jira clone test environment. Let's say I switch to another server, which I'm testing the API, then I will choose the server or the environment I'm working with. And when I look here, then the variables, so everything that runs in test case actually will use this. So it could be different tokens, different usernames, whatever, you name it. This is very useful when you're testing the same test case, but you're validating it uh, actually on the same API, but with different API versions which are running on different servers, etc. Um, read about environment variables. But I think this is the most useful feature when you're a tester, especially when you're working with developers, logging bugs, revalidating your test case, right? Let's say your test case fails on a development environment, but you want to validate it also on a production environment. So you're just switching the variables. So you're not wasting time on rewriting all the variables. And typically you would have like 20 different variables or something that constructs your test collection, etc. I hope this is clear. Any questions about the two workshops? Anyway, I leave you with the information. You can still at least you know you can read about it. Um, I still don't see any questions, so I will move forward. Yeah. So we've gone through the comments API, the assignment you have, environment variables, data files, and I hope I left you with something useful. All right, wrap day. You must be familiar with it. It starts on Saturday. It's a single day assignment. Uh, you just need to review the results of um, your colleagues, provide constructive feedback. Uh, constructive really also includes being critical. That's okay. Like find as many issues as you can. Just do it in a positive way. And please update your learning diary. And please, in the learning diary, make sure you're putting it in the proper Google Drive location, because if the URL is not accessible, uh, the assignment will be rejected, which is very silly for a learning diary. Um, so just pay attention to this. I sometimes see people don't provide like working URLs. That's just a remark or heads up. And now that's important. You're graduating, so congratulations actually for making it this far. There's the graduation week is it starts next Saturday. It should be a 1 week, right? So you have 1 week to just perform the exam. Uh, and actually, it's like 8 days. um, and it's really important to know that it's not like how we used to do it in school that if you don't succeed in the exam, it's like you completely failed. No, I think you get, if I'm not mistaken, you get 5 trials to redo the exam actually. And the idea here is to learn and to make sure you learned and to remember and recap what you learned during the past period. So make use of the graduation week. It's okay to fail. So don't worry if you're failing. There's nothing against you. There's nothing tracked, even like how many times you failed it, etc. So it's not a problem. Try if you fail in a question. My personal advice would be to actually try to read more. So it's not about retaking the exam, but it's more about knowing where you failed and just reading more about it and trying to succeed the next time when you really comprehend why you failed before. So I really like the fact that Cerebrum Hub made this graduation like very tolerating. Uh, and of course, if the time allows, right? So you have 1 week where there isn't much to do. Then you can already start on the career module assignment. I think yes, the career module also will be visible for you. It will officially start on the 15th of April. At least those are the dates I got informed some time back. I don't know if there are any recent changes, but you should get everything in LMS. But yes, the advice, start looking at the career module. You can start already working maybe on your LinkedIn page or things like that. So it's just information. This will be open actually from next week. Uh, Next session is pretty intense, I would say, because we will dive into some of the mistakes of your feedback actually and the collections. I'll have a look at some of them and I'll give feedback on them. Then the workshop itself will be going through the collections and answering, of course, any questions, any struggles you had, etc. And of course, there will be a summary for Project 6, and there will be an introduction. Uh, hmm, what's that? Okay. I didn't know there's a feature actually to uh, to write on my board. Um, I will ignore that unless someone wants to say something about it or trying to notify me. Anyway, but that's it for today. I think I'll see you next Monday. But one last time, I'll ask if you have any questions. Please speak now. Hmm. Okay, maybe 5 more seconds. 4, 3. Is it an sorry, sorry, sorry. It's not an hour earlier. Thank you for asking this. No, it's the same time. I work in a different time zone. So it's my mistake. In my calendar, it looks 5:10, but no, follow the LMS calendar. It's at 6:10 Tallinn time. Thank you for the notification and sorry for the mistake. Um, right, I'll stop sharing. That's what I call a good tester. See you next week. Have a good evening.